The snow was melting slow this year, reluctant as the man who lived among the pines. His cabin sat deep in the woods, where axes rang louder than hymns and men kept to themselves out of habit, not shame. He wasn't known by name, not really. Folks called him Lark once, long ago, but out here names didn't matter as much as silence. And silence, he kept plenty of. He came into town once a month, twice if his mule was lame or he needed whiskey to forget something he'd never speak of. That day, he wasn't looking for trouble. Wasn't looking for anyone. But there she stood, barefoot on the back of a trader's wagon, wrists bound in front, chin tilted like royalty, though her skin was mud-smeared and her mouth split at the corner. The auctioneer, some road dust fool in a ratty hat, called her liability stock. Said she was half cursed, half useless, and full of backtalk. She's black, the man spat to a crowd that didn't need reminding. And ain't even mine proper. Stepdaughter. Mother died, girl went bad. Look at her. Wouldn't even cry when her baby was lost. Lark's jaw ticked. The woman didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't look at anyone but the distant horizon where the pines rose like old sentries. Her stomach, beneath the threadbare dress, didn't show. But something about the way she held herself, arm across her belly, hand barely grazing her side, made him pause. The crowd shifted. No one bid. Not even for spite. Too dark, too proud, too dangerous. She wasn't the kind you used. She was the kind that made you feel ashamed after. Lark said nothing. Just stepped forward, pulled 2 coins from his coat pocket, and dropped them in the auctioneer's hand like he was buying nails. The trader blinked, then grinned wide and cruel. You'll regret her, woodsman. He walked away with her at his side, no hand on her shoulder, no leash, no claim. Just the slow crunch of melting snow beneath 2 sets of boots, his heavy and familiar, hers too light, too careful. They didn't speak on the trail. Not for hours. Not until the town disappeared behind them and the trees swallowed the path. Then, near the crest where pine needles dulled the wind and twilight turned the world blue, he finally looked at her. You cold? He asked. She didn't answer. He tugged off his coat and handed it to her without insistence. She stared at it, then at him. Then took it, slowly, like touching anything might curse her worse. By the time they reached the cabin, darkness had set in like old grief. Smoke rose from the chimney, though he hadn't lit a fire. Habit, he thought. Or maybe the land remembered him better than people did. Inside, the hearth waited. He stoked it wordlessly. She stood by the door until her legs gave out. He caught her before she hit the floor. She tensed under his hands like a deer expecting the shot. He didn't linger. Just helped her to the rocker, set water to boil, and turned away. Later, when she slept curled in the coat, he sat by the fire with a whittling knife in one hand and a rough hunk of pine in the other. Not shaping anything in particular. Just keeping busy. His eyes flicked to the cradle tucked in the shadows near the corner, covered in a tarp. She stirred in the dark. Muttered something under her breath. A name, maybe. Or a prayer. He closed his eyes. I ain't gonna ask, he said into the stillness. Ain't gonna press. You'll talk if you want to. She didn't reply. Outside, an owl hooted once. Then again. Next morning, mist rolled over the valley like a secret. He found her at the woodpile, trying to lift a log too big for her arms. She didn't ask for help. Just gritted her teeth, blood dried on her lip from where she'd bitten it the night before. He took the log from her. Ain't your work. She met his eyes for the first time. Ain't yours to say. He let the log drop, and for the first time in years, something close to a smile cracked his face. Not because it was funny. Because she had fire. Later, while he cut kindling, she cleaned. Scrubbed the windows like she meant to see out of them. When she found the small grave marker behind the cabin, just a cross of birch and a name carved so shallow the rain nearly took it, she said nothing. He saw her standing there, eyes closed, hand resting just under her ribs. That night, she sang a hymn low under her breath as she stirred stew. It wasn't for him. It was for whatever ache she carried in her gut that hadn't been named yet. But he heard it. Every word like a nail in soft wood. He left her a strip of smoked meat by her bowl and a fresh flower, just a small thing, blue and trembling. She looked at it long, then tucked it behind her ear without a word. The days passed like slow thunder. She slept in the corner cot. He slept near the fire. They didn't touch, didn't talk much, but the silence changed. It became warm. A different kind of blanket. When he prayed at night, he thought he was quiet. But she heard him. "Forgive me," he whispered one night, voice rough with whiskey and regret. She opened her eyes in the dark, said nothing. But the next morning, she carved a small bird from driftwood and left it by the hearth. A peace offering, or a warning. On the 7th day, he found her kneeling in the garden, hands deep in the dirt. Snow flurried around her, but she stayed still as stone. He approached slow, saw she was weeping. Quiet, bitter tears that fell soundless on the earth. He didn't speak, just crouched nearby, not touching, not asking. After a long while, she said, "I lost one. Back in Georgia. The day the river flooded. They called it punishment." His throat tightened. He stared at the ground. "Did you name him?" he asked. She didn't look up. No. Wasn't allowed. He stood, walked back into the cabin. When he returned, he held a hammer and a plank, sat beside the old grave and began to carve. She watched from the porch. He didn't ask what name to write. Just carved a new cross beside the old one. Left the space blank. For now. The woman came down and laid her hand on the new marker. Then looked up at him, eyes shimmering with something halfway between defiance and gratitude. "You a God-fearing man?" she asked. "No," he said. "But I talked to him anyway." She nodded. "Then maybe he heard you." They stood there a while. The snow stopped. The wind calmed. A raven flew low over the pines, screaming once, like it knew something neither of them yet did. Inside the cabin, the fire burned steady. Outside, 2 crosses stood under the tree, neither marked fully, neither forgotten. And between them, without touch or claim, a strange peace began to take root. A quiet pact. She wouldn't run. And he wouldn't ask why she'd come. Not yet. But soon. The rains came in steady now, turning the hard-packed trails to mud and the pine needles slick with shadow. The woman, still unnamed by his mouth, moved through the cabin with silent purpose. Her steps made no sound on the wooden floorboards, though the old place groaned under its own memory. He watched her sometimes when she didn't know, hands wiping down windowsills, arms elbow-deep in dishwater, face lit faintly by lantern light. She never smiled. Not fully. But there were flickers, a hum as she kneaded dough, a pause at the threshold to watch deer move ghost-like at dusk. He didn't ask where she was from. Didn't press for the child's father, or why she still flinched when thunder cracked across the sky. But something told him she'd seen men worse than weather, and he had no interest in pretending the world was kinder than it was. One morning, she stepped into the shed to fetch firewood and stopped cold. He was in there, back turned, sawing plank from pine, slow, careful strokes. She thought, at first, it was just another stool or shelf. Then she saw the curve of it, the hollow dip, the small, cradling shape. She stood there long enough for him to notice. But he didn't turn. "I don't need charity," she said finally, voice sharp as flint. He paused his sawing, then resumed. "Ain't charity," he said. "It's wood." She narrowed her eyes. "You know what I'm carrying?" He set the saw down, wiped his hands on his trousers. Then turned, gaze steady. "I don't need to." That silenced her. She left without another word, but that night she lit the fire herself for the first time. Then set a tin cup beside his chair and filled it with coffee, bitter and black. They spoke little over the next days. But their silences turned strange, less hollow, more like something shared. A quiet pact between ghosts. He learned she stitched by hand, could gut a fish without flinching, and once saved a rabbit kit from the snare and fed it until it vanished back into the wild. She learned he carved things in the dark, walked the woods like he was part of them, and never let her carry the heavy pails of water from the stream. Still, a boundary lingered. Not unkind, but unmoved. Like a door neither dared open. Then came the letter. It arrived with a passing rider, handed over with dust still clinging to the fold. No name on the front. Just a seal, cracked and faded. Lark took it in with a glance and said nothing. Stuffed it into the pocket of his coat like it meant less than smoke. That night, he didn't touch his stew. Just stared into the fire until the woman asked, "Bad news?" He shook his head once. "Old news. You want to talk on it?" He looked up at her slowly. What good would that do? Her eyes didn't blink. Might keep it from poisoning you. He didn't reply. But later, when he thought she'd gone to sleep, he pulled the letter out again and read it by the dim light of the hearth. His hands trembled once. Just once. Then stilled. She watched from the shadows and said nothing. She knew better than to ask too soon. The next day, he went into the woods before dawn and didn't return until the moon was high. His hands were sap-stained and raw. He smelled of iron and wet bark. She didn't question it. Just laid a bowl of stew on the table and nodded toward it. He sat, ate in silence. Then finally, was a boy. Named him Elias. Died before his 5th winter. Fever got him. She looked down. I'm sorry. She left after that. His ma. Took the wagon and what money we had and vanished. The woman nodded. That why you bought me? He paused. Didn't think about it. Just saw you standing there. And I couldn't. He didn't finish the sentence. She didn't ask him to. A wind howled that night. Strong enough to shake the shutters. She sat near the fire, rubbing her swollen ankles. He crouched beside the window, listening. Then, sudden and sharp, a branch cracked outside. He stood fast. Don't light the lantern, he whispered. She stilled. Another crack. Closer this time. He grabbed the rifle hanging above the door and moved out into the night, soft-footed despite his size. She followed to the doorframe, heart pounding in her throat. A shadow moved just beyond the tree-lean. Not animal. Two-legged. Watching. He raised the rifle. You lost. Silence. Then, ain't lost. Just curious. The voice was rough, amused. Southern drawl soaked in liquor. Heard a rumor you bought yourself some trouble, Lark. The woman froze. The man stepped forward just enough to show his outline. Another figure loomed behind him, tall and still. Maybe a third, half hidden near the creek. Lark didn't lower the gun. Ain't trouble here. Just a roof and a fire. Move along. Don't think so, the man said. See, her stepdaddy says she's stolen. Says she ran off with his goods. That includes what she's carrying. Lark's knuckles whitened around the rifle. She's not his goods. Well, the voice chuckled, she sure as hell ain't yours either. A beat passed. Then the crunch of footsteps. They withdrew, but not far. Lark returned inside, jaw tight. She didn't ask what they said. She'd heard enough. They'll be back, he muttered, bolting the door. Not tonight, but soon. She sat by the fire again. If you want me gone. No. She looked up. No, he said again, softer. You didn't run from this. They'll have to run through me. She didn't cry. Just stared at him like trying to memorize the lines of his face. Then she rose, slowly, wincing, and crossed to the cot. Laid down, back turned to him. But before she closed her eyes, she whispered, his name was Isaac. Mine to name, even if I never held him. Lark didn't speak. Just sat with his hand resting on the wood he'd carved earlier, a cradle almost finished, smooth and strong. When she woke in the night, wind still howling, she found him asleep in the chair, rifle across his lap, boots still on, eyes sunken but peaceful for once. She watched him for a long time. Then she reached over, pulled the quilt from the cot, and covered him carefully. Outside, the trees groaned with memory. Inside, the fire burned low, but steady. Neither of them dreamed. Not that night. The rain came down angry and slantwise, drumming the roof in erratic bursts like hoofbeats in the distance. By midday, the skies turned gunmetal, and the air was thick with the smell of ashwood smoke and something older, like iron, like warning. She sat at the table, stirring the stew that hadn't started to boil, her hand resting lightly on the round of her belly, now unmistakable. The wind clawed the window like it wanted in. Lark stood by the door with a rifle, checking the oil, the chamber, the sound it made when he cocked it. His shoulders were stiff with something he hadn't named, but she could see it in how he didn't sit, didn't speak. "You think it's tonight?" she asked quietly. "I think men like that don't like being told no." She didn't argue. She knew the kind of men who treated silence like defiance and softness like permission. The kind who didn't need reasons, only opportunity. And she'd seen the look in their eyes that night beneath the trees, the one that meant they'd be back. Not because they had a claim, but because they wanted to remind her she didn't. She ladled the stew into bowls they wouldn't eat from. Rain splashed down the chimney once, hissing into the fire. He didn't move. An hour passed. Then another. She stood to draw the curtains tighter when a sharp knock rang at the door, not hesitant, not polite. 2 beats. Then a third. Lark didn't speak, just raised the rifle, then motioned for her to step back. The knock came again. Then a voice, too calm. "Evening." She froze. That voice. She knew it in her bones. Her stepfather didn't talk loud unless he was drunk. And drunk was how he stayed. "Got myself 2 riders," the voice said through the door, muffled by wood and water. "Boys from Idaho. Got law badges and everything. Says you stole from me." Lark opened the door an inch, enough to see but not to let the storm in. The man on the porch looked older, more shriveled, his cheeks hollowed from rotgut and bad choices. But the smile was the same. Slippery. Mean. His coat sagged under the weight of rain, and behind him stood 2 strangers, one with a long scar from his temple to his jaw, the other chewing tobacco with a dead look in his eye. "She's with me by her choosing," Lark said calmly. "You come back without a judge or paper, I'll take it as trespass." The man snorted. "Boy, you think pines'll keep you safe? Ain't no law out here. You know what she did? Killed my wife. Her own kin. A lie." She felt it like heat up her spine. But still, some part of her trembled. Because lies told with enough conviction have a way of sticking, especially when you're a black woman with no last name and too much silence. Lark didn't blink. "You've got until the count of 3. The scarred man stepped forward. "We've got authority." 3. The click of the rifle echoed like thunder in a church. The men hesitated, then backed down the steps, slow and seething. Her stepfather spat in the mud. "You ain't seen the last of me." Lark shut the door, bolted it, then turned to her, jaw tight. "We've got a day, maybe less." She nodded. No panic, just resignation. This wasn't new, only colder. They spent the next hour stacking wood inside, dousing the walls with buckets in case of fire, laying iron by the windows. She stuffed towels under the doors. He checked every angle of the land like he'd done this before. It was near dark when the sky broke. Not just rain, but storm, thunder rolling so close it rattled the cabin walls. She stood by the window and watched lightning snap above the treetops, illuminating 3 figures riding back in like wraiths. Then flames. They didn't knock this time. They threw a bottle, glass and oil and fire. It burst on the porch and screamed alive. Lark was already moving. Doused it with water. Stomped the edge. She threw a quilt over the coals near the wall. Then the front door crashed in. The scarred man came first. She didn't have time to scream before Lark tackled him, the 2 crashing into the table with a sound that split the room. The second man grabbed her from behind, rough and fast. She elbowed him in the gut, twisted, bit his hand. He reeled back and slapped her so hard her vision flickered. Still, she clawed at his face, drew blood. The man cursed, reached for her again. Then a gunshot. The scarred man slumped forward, Lark beneath him, blood leaking from his mouth. The second man froze, eyes wide. Lark stood, chest heaving, barrel of the rifle smoking. The second man bolted. Outside, hooves pounded mud. She stumbled to Lark, hands on his chest. "You?" He shook his head. "Not mine." The blood wasn't his. Not yet. He leaned the rifle against the wall, swayed once, caught himself. "Your stepfather," she whispered. "Didn't see him." A crack rang out, gunfire from the trees. Wood splintered near the window. They dropped low. She crawled to the door, peeked. He was out there. Alone now. Standing in the rain, arms raised. Drunk. Smiling. "I come for what's mine," he shouted. "Give me the girl." Lark stepped into the doorway, soaked, face unreadable. "You come again, and you won't leave walking." The man laughed. "I'll leave with a body one way or another." Another shot. Missed wide. Lark didn't return fire. Just stood tall. Waiting. A moment passed. Then the old man turned. Got on his horse. And vanished into the storm. They waited till dawn before stepping outside again. The bodies were gone. Taken or abandoned. The fire on the porch left scorch marks on the floorboards. Rain had done the rest. She sat on the step, shivering. Lark wrapped a blanket around her, then crouched. "You all right?" She nodded. "He won't stop." "I know." He took her hand. "But neither will I." She stared at their hands, the difference in skin, in size, in strength, and found something steady in that grip. "Why do you care?" she asked. He looked out toward the trees. Then down at her belly. "Because I asked God to send me something I could still protect." "And you think I'm that?" "I think it's not about what I think." She leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat there, listening to the wind, the storm retreating behind the mountains. But neither believed it was over. Not yet. The cradle sat in the corner, half-shadowed by firelight, carved from red pine, sanded smooth by hands that had once broken bone and felled trees with equal indifference. Now those same hands ran reverent across curved wood, checking for splinters, catching on nothing but time. The woman stood behind him, belly round, bare feet pressing gently into the worn rug. The baby hadn't come yet, but it moved more now, rolling like thunder under her skin. She placed one hand low, just above her hip, and watched as he adjusted the blanket inside the cradle. Her voice, when it came, was soft. "You never asked if it's a boy." He didn't turn. "Don't matter." "It might," she said. He turned then. Met her eyes. "It's not about what it is. It's about what it'll never have to be." She didn't smile, but her mouth softened. In his words, there was something rare, a promise made without a future to borrow from. Outside, the snow fell slow and thick, muting the forest. Winter had closed in again, sealing the pines under white and locking the trail in silence. But they hadn't spoken of escape. Not once. Not since the fire. Not since the man who called himself father had vanished back into the hills, wounded but not broken. And that silence, the space between what was said and what hung heavy in their breath, felt more like fate than fear. She dreamed that night. In her sleep, she was back in Georgia, barefoot in a burned church, her hands wet with ash and water, holding a baby that never cried. In the pews sat men without faces. Watching. Judging. Whispering her name like it didn't belong to her anymore. She woke to footsteps on the porch. Slow. Deliberate. She reached for the fire poker. He was already by the door, rifle lifted. The knock came once. Then again. No shouting this time. No threats. Then a voice, low, hoarse, close to broken. "It's me. I got no gun. Ain't here to fight." The woman looked at Lark. His face didn't move. "I'm dying," the voice said. "Figured I'd see her one last time." The woman stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed. "Let him speak," she said. Lark didn't lower the rifle, but opened the door with caution. Her stepfather stood there, swaying, face gray, lips blue. "Fever. I got snake bit 2 days back," he rasped. "Didn't bleed it right. Swollen to my chest now." She didn't flinch. "You here to confess?" He chuckled. "Coughed blood into the snow. Not hardly. Just didn't want to die without knowing what name you'd give that bastard child." She stepped out into the cold, barefoot, belly bold, eyes burning. "You want a name? I'll give you 2. One for the child. One for the grave you earned." The old man swayed. "You were always fire. Even when I tried to put it out." She didn't touch him. Didn't pity him. Just watched as he dropped to his knees, coughing again. He looked up at her. "Ain't no forgiveness coming, is there?" "No." He nodded. "Then maybe that's fair." He collapsed, dead before his face hit the snow. She stood there a long time, not moving, not weeping. Lark came beside her, wrapped a coat over her shoulders. "Want me to bury him?" "No," she said. "Let the crows sort it." They left him there until morning. By then, the wolves had already begun. She didn't look. Back inside, she lit the fire. Sat in the rocker near the cradle, one hand resting on her stomach. "I hated him," she said. "But part of me still thought he might ask for mercy." "Did you want to give it?" he asked. "No," she said. "But I wanted to want to." He knelt beside her, silent. Then she leaned down, picked up a piece of wood from the hearth, one he'd carved into the shape of a dove. "I want to name him," she said. "All right. Elias. For the one you lost." He looked at her sharply. "You don't have to." "I know. But I want to." His eyes glistened. Just briefly. He didn't blink it away. They sat like that for a while, 2 figures by firelight, shadows dancing along the walls. Then came the sound. Not footsteps. Hooves. 3 riders. Fast. Too fast for anyone friendly. Lark stood. "Get behind the table." She obeyed, slow now with the weight of the child. He stepped outside. This time the riders didn't wait. Guns barked before words did. He dove behind the stack of logs, bullets chewing into the cabin wall. Inside, she grabbed the pistol he kept under the stove and checked the chamber, just as he'd shown her. She counted 2 men, strangers. The third she couldn't see. Lark fired back, clipped one in the shoulder. The man screamed and dropped his gun. Then the third revealed himself, stepping around the corner with something long in his hands. A torch. The cabin lit orange at the base, heat racing up the outer wall. Lark turned to stomp it out, but too late. The side caught, flames racing the wind. He shouted to her. "Out the back." She grabbed the blanket from the cradle, wrapped it around herself, and ran into smoke. A rider tried to grab her. She shot once, missed, but Lark tackled the man clean off the horse, fists pounding until the man didn't move. The last one fled. Smoke thickened. The cabin groaned. Lark stumbled toward her, coughing, face ash-streaked. The fire crackled toward the cradle. He paused, turned back. "No," she screamed. "Leave it." But he ran back in. She didn't breathe until he emerged, coughing hard, cradling the pine wood in his arms, blackened but intact. She fell to her knees. He dropped beside her. Then blood. So much blood. Not from a gun. From a gash across his side, splintered wood or something worse. She pressed her hands to the wound. "Stay with me." He blinked. "Did I save it?" She nodded, tears running. "I don't care," he whispered. "It was for you, not the wood." She kissed his forehead. "Don't you leave us," she said. "I'm tired," he murmured. "Then rest. But not forever." She dragged him to the shed, tore blankets, made a poultice. He didn't speak again that night, but he breathed. The next morning, The snow was falling again. Slow. Gentle. She sat beside the bed, belly full, hands steady. The cradle sat near the hearth, scorched on one side, but whole. He woke at last. And the first thing he saw was her, braiding her hair, eyes full of light. "You stayed," he rasped. "I told you," she said. "Found family doesn't leave." His hand reached out, found hers. The child kicked. He smiled through cracked lips. "That miracle I prayed for. It wasn't the baby." She frowned. "No. It was this. Living when we shouldn't have." She laid her head beside his chest. The fire crackled. Outside, the forest stood still, dressed in white. And inside, life waited to begin again. Quiet, earned, and finally, theirs. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.